Okay, so Diane Schwindt, you all have grown to know and love. She's a wonderful presenter. She's here again to talk about a topic relevant to President's Day. So without further ado, here is Diane.
I'm back. Well, I did a presentation last Wednesday and it went well. I was a little nervous about it, but I learned so much. I love these discussions because it pushes me beyond that colonial. Remember when I brought all the cooking stuff and the schlepping and the so on? There's so much more about cooking, history, food history, that's around us. So Ellen asked me to do something about President's Day. I'm like, sure, no problem. I had just gotten this book. The course, no pun intended, the course of history, 10 meals that changed the world.
What a boring book.
I have to tell you, I started reading it and I realized that the meals that were being presented were way beyond anything that we would even want to eat, like grouse and all sorts of things. But the book was really about the politics behind it, which I am not very knowledgeable about, nor do I seem to understand, because the second I understand, they all switch gears and I don't understand it again. So that kind of pushed me in another direction. So I wanted to know what President's Day was. Like, how did it get here? You know, the basic history stuff. Does anybody really know? It's the day you get really good bargains on mattresses, car deals. I'm curious. And TVs. I don't think that was listed. So the history of President's Day started around 1879. The total dates are, federal dates are 46 federal holidays. Does that read right? Total dates are 46. Federal holidays were created by Congress to create a federal day off for workers. Now everybody gets a day off. So it's not just federal workers. And then I put laugh out loud. Mattresses, cars, and appliances. In 1968, Congress passed it as a holiday act. Most federal holidays fall on either Monday or Friday. There are a few exceptions, but they do that so people could have a 3-day weekend. I just figured it was closest to the date. I never knew that it was actually a planned thing. The newest one was it went from Martin Luther King, Washington, Memorial Day, Juneteenth, which is the new one, 4th of July, Columbus Day, Veterans Day, Thanksgiving, Christmas. There's 11 in total. So that kind of got me thinking about food and so on. So we have this day, which is supposed to, I thought, was to reflect our presidents. So I started focusing on food and our presidents. So, and then they create these elaborate meals at the White House, and how did that all come to be and so on. So you're going to get an earful. To break bread together, it's basically, it's hard to remain an enemy with somebody when you're eating dinner with them. So food is a bridge. I remember fairly recently, and I could not find it, but the UN did a dinner where all these officials were there and they broke bread together. It is mentioned 495 times in the Bible, breaking bread together. So there's a whole long kind of interpretation of it. But the bottom line is you're eating with somebody else. You're breaking bread with them. And your disagreements, for even if it's for a split moment of time, they fade away, and it's over food. So when the White House creates these dinners, you cannot imagine the stress, and I'm going to go, that's at the end of the lecture, the stress that's put into creating the perfect meal. We celebrate holidays with meals. Everybody have the tradition around your Easter holidays, your Christmas holidays. We've spoken about this in a discussion prior to this. We have our traditions. Victorians had funeral food. Imagine that. There's food for births and christenings and death and so on. all around food. It connects us to a moment. We smell food, it may connect us to a memory, and so on. Breaking bread together. Even the food symbolizes different things throughout time. You have communion, you're breaking bread. It symbolizes something in your religion. Starting with Dwight Eisenhower with the name change. They changed it. Presidential meals were for foreign policies and toasts, treaty toasts around food. Political fundraisers. How many of you ever gone to a political fundraiser? You had to write that check, keep your job. Oh yeah, that's right. I didn't book it. Sorry. Yeah, you have no idea. And it is true. People do lose their jobs if you're not politically connected to go to these fundraisers. You are looked at differently, and it is better to be seen at some of these things than not. So I looked up what was the most expensive ticket for a political fundraiser dinner. $500,806. That was for a couple. For a couple. Who was the president? It was fairly recently. Trump. But you got a picture of him, an autographed picture, so it's okay. State dinners to develop communication and peace among nations. Obama, September 1st, year 2010, kicks off with a dinner, Middle East peace talks. The meal served wild mushrooms, lobster, spinach, leeks, noodle rolls. I don't know what they are. Lamb's garlic fried lamb with fried garlic milk. Anybody know what that is? Oh, it sounds what?
Terrible.
Yeah. Baby broccoli, poppy seed bread with a butter pudding and a lemon curd. Well, there's a showstopper. Lemon curd, a lychee sorbet. That's what they serve. Trump gave a dinner to beginning the treat to start with trading for peace. Trump gave a dinner to bring trade peace, a sit-down dinner with Chinese leaders. Having the impact will determine whether the stock market will rise or fall. Your economic future is basically being based on a dinner party. Think about this. Whether the world economics, okay, gets relief, stabilized, tensions, okay, you better have really good faith in your cook. These dinners are really important. We sit here and we don't think about these things, but they're creating dinners and foods in the White House that are going to change the future of our world. The rules of etiquette at these events. There's a whole nother chapter about etiquette, what to wear, how to position yourself, what to say, what not to say, what silverware is used. It's ridiculous. You never have a second chance to make a first impression. There was one president that went as far as getting colored lights to create. They had white flowers in the garden, but to make them purple and blue, the same color as they were peonies, the same colors as the national bird of India, which was a peacock. So it would just give that feeling for it. You need to put more effort into your holiday meals, people. Andrew Jackson had a 2-ton wheel of cheese made. 2 tons. Why? Well, to feed the people. But he put it in the lobby So people could come and cut off a piece of cheese and he could talk to them. It was just a political gimmick. And he did it with cheese. Talk about the mouse and the cheese. Thomas Jefferson. You know what Thomas Jefferson is famous for with food?
French fries?
No. Macaroni and cheese. Macaroni and cheese. Yeah, he's a big fan of macaroni and cheese, which you have in your snack bags to go home. Theodore Roosevelt, fried chicken. Madison, Charlie Madison. Anybody know what she's famous for?
Ice cream.
No.
Gotcha.
No, they didn't hear the story how the White House was burning down and she cut the picture of George Washington out and she escaped in common clothes in a carriage and like she dressed like a farmer's wife or something like that. Anybody remember that story from the history book? So the real story is that they knew the British were coming. So she did have the picture cut out and rolled up. She was on the other side of the river when the British actually got there, but they had set the table for a state meal. So when the British came into the White House, they saw this table being set with all this food and thought that the Americans were celebrating their victory prematurely. So the British sat down, they ate the meal, and then they burnt the house down, the White House down. But their conclusion is that we were basically celebrating our victory long before. It just happened to be timing in life. So again, the wrong idea came to be because the table was set. So Lincoln. Also, Dolly Madison was the beginner of the egg roll on the lawn of the White House. Anybody know that with the egg roll? It's still being done to this day, the egg roll on the White House. Lincoln did not particularly care for food or dislike food. It was just fuel for his body. He was very practical and just said it was fuel. He wasn't into this pomp and circumstance of food and etiquette. He just wanted to eat. So right around this time period, William Harrison. Anybody know about William Harrison, our president? Probably not, because he only lived 31 days. So there wasn't a lot written about his food likes or dislikes.
There was no order. He insisted on going outside.
Mm-hmm.
It was very cold. And he caught a cold.
Oh, that's how he died.
That's how-
Really? 31 days. Yeah, it's very interesting. So as I'm reading through this, so anybody that wants, you can just take the website down. There's 51 pages of our president's likes and dislikes with food and so on. So as I tried to go through it, I tried to pull out like those like little tidbits that I thought would be kind of interesting. So we had Lincoln. Okay, Fillmore. Fillmore was from 1850 to 1853. Now, for me, that was a very significant moment in time. All of those presidents prior to, all of those meals were being cooked on a hearth, a fireplace. So right around that time period, the turn of the century, it was like towards the 1800s. That's when those big cast iron stoves came in and more cooks were being hired to do cooking for the White House. Anybody want to take a guess what nationality these cooks were? No. Pardon me?
I want to think that they be Italian. With food.
Most of them were enslaved people that had now become free, and they were the cooks. They were, think about here in the United States, a lot of the Africans were the cooks, and they traveled with all of these. Who was George Washington? He was a plantation owner. Lincoln, all these people, they brought their cooks with them. They were good cooks. So a lot of the influences very early on, I see the same thing over in the food choices over, and a lot of these presidents were from down south. They had corn. In your package, I'm going to talk about it in a little bit, is I put cornbread, corn muffin, corn mash, corn cereal, corn. Corn was a big component with every single president, corn. But think about the economic ramifications around, I don't know if that's the right word, around corn. Corn, it drove this country. Corn was money. Anyway, okay. Okay, Pierce, okay, state dinner, okay. State dinners in the White House were not up to par with the affluent Washington DC-er. And around that time, that's when you started getting those more fancy meals. Before that, if you were very wealthy in DC and around that area, you wouldn't go to a state dinner because it wasn't worth your time. It was too common for you. So when you think of our presidents and the White House as being very elite, it wasn't elite in the beginning. It wasn't until a little bit later in time period that it was kicked up a notch for these big giant meals of elegance. Grant at these state meals would roll up bread. You ever take bread and kind of roll it in like little peas like that? And he would flick it at his kids. 1874, that was at a state dinner, and it was for the dignitaries from Hawaii. Calvin Coolidge, our 30th president, he could not understand why his chickens tasted different. He had chicken, but they had a very distinct taste. They were different than all of the chickens that he had. His wife insisted on having a chicken coop like by the kitchen area at the White House for fresh chickens, but the chickens didn't taste right. Didn't you know why?
They foul.
No. Good on guns. So Roosevelt, the president before, had a mint patch, and they put the chicken coop right on top of the mint patch, the crop of mint, and the chickens were eating the mint, and it affected the meat. They couldn't understand why the chicken wasn't tasting all that good. Garfield was sick, and his doctor suggested to the cook that he eat squirrel. They also sent for a cow, and they had a cow right by the kitchen door, so he would also have fresh milk, and he died. So there was a cow for fresh milk, and he was eating squirrel. Taft. Anybody know anything really interesting about Taft?
You like gold?
What?
You like gold?
Yes, he did. Anybody want to take a guess on his weight?
100 pounds.
Oh, you Google it?
No,
Oh, I thought that I saw your phone out. I'm like,
stuck in the bathtub.
he got stuck in the bathtub. He was at least 330 pounds. He got stuck in the bathtub. So I just want to say, he liked potted porridge, boiled venison. This was for breakfast. Boiled venison, grilled partridge, waffles with maple syrup, butter, hominy hot, and rolls with bacon, and the list just went on. So that was just for breakfast that he was eating these things. Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt. You know what they're famous for? Hot dogs. They like serving hot dogs to their guests. Dwight Eisenhower. Now, Dwight Eisenhower, if you remember anything from the timeline of food, this is Eisenhower is like now everything in the United States is starting to change, becoming more modernized. There's the space age, all that time period is all happening in there. What do you think his food of choice was? Nope.
Spam.
Nope. You're kind of in the right ballpark though. Not so elegant. TV dinners. TV dinners. He was done with the day. He just wanted to turn the TV on, get his little snack tray, and eat his TV dinner. So when you think of these people as being so powerful, behind closed doors, they're eating TV dinners. Kennedy, this is a good one. All right, so Kennedy. Important, the whole 9 yards. See, they had elaborate dinners. Now, Jacqueline, most of these dinners were orchestrated not by the president, but it's usually his wife. And I wrote it down. Let me see if I can remember without going back. Because I wanted to know how many people it took to put a dinner together, how many departments it took, and once I come across it, I'll get back to you on that. But there's 3 different departments, but it's the president's wife who really dictates these meals and events and so on. So Jacqueline's in charge, and she decides she's having state dinner at Mount Vernon. So they get all the committees and whatever. And the chef, now this is a French chef, so there were French chefs that came in. So at different times, different presidents had different chefs, but I didn't see any Italian, but I definitely saw French chefs in there. So there's this French chef, and he's like flipping out. Why is he flipping out? Because earlier in the day, they had such a mosquito problem that they called the exterminators in and they sprayed DDT to get rid of the mosquitoes and also into the kitchen over the food. The committee tasted the food that was just sprayed with DDT, said didn't affect the taste, and the meal went on. So think about that. We don't even put that in our bug spray for whatever. And we know that that's a no-go. So DDT sprayed on your food. Okay, Lyndon Johnson, Texas, big, large barbecues. Nixon. Really? Nixon. What did he like?
Chinese.
No. Dun-dun-dun. He liked ketchup on cottage cheese. He put ketchup on everything. When he was entertaining diplomats from China, it said he made sure that he also included silverware and chopsticks at the dinner table, so everybody felt comfortable. Carter. Peanuts. He was a plantation owner. He grew peanuts. He had this giant farm of peanuts. So going back in time, because the lecture I did on Wednesday, I also found that peanuts when you see general information about slavery, you see peanuts in the West. But I couldn't find it in anything I was reading or researching or whatever. I mean, I would see it in spots, but it wasn't like other items, food items. But peanuts became really important or focused because as the Civil War broke out, a peanut has 25% protein in it, and it fed the troops. So if you're feeding your troops, because you have to feed your troops, you're going to need more merchandise. You're going to need more peanuts. So if you're growing more peanuts, you need more slaves. So you need more workforce. So peanuts, that's why it became a big issue at that time period. But also down south, because that's where it grows. It's a tropical plant, semi-tropical. But peanuts were really, Carter happens to like peanuts because he grows them. Reagan, yes.
I thought there was some sort of like a cotton crop failure that
Could be.
happened, and they ended up, because the cotton wasn't growing and was getting destroyed, they ended up supplementing the fields, the peanuts. Because it was
That could be, and I'm not really
Crop
sure, and I don't like giving information I'm not like dead certain about, but I do remember reading, and it could be that particular thing. The crops were failing because of soil. What happens is different plants, this is the horticulture part of me, different parts, they actually pull out nitrogens and different minerals from the soil. And I think what happened is the soil was depleted from one thing and they planted, it was crop rotation, that they planted the peanuts. But the amount of peanuts that had to be grown to feed the troops, I think that was another shift. But I'm gonna look into that and then I'll email Ellen on that one. But I kind of remember something around that time period And it could have been the cotton and the peanuts, but I'm not dead on that, certain about that, but I'll check it in. But I do remember something about crop rotation, and it could be that. Okay, oh. Reagan. No. That was Bush. Wait until you hear that story. Reagan. Kennedy. George Bush. His mother would feed him broccoli. Like, you say an apple a day keeps the doctor away. Well, her theory was broccoli a day. Made him eat broccoli every day. And let me see if I wrote the quote down correctly here. So he writes against broccoli now. He goes, basically, I'm the president of the United States. And this is the last discussion I'm having about broccoli. I'm not eating it. And that was it. That was the end of the broccoli story. I guess when you get to that point in life, you can, start yourself a little bit. Barack Obama. He likes broccoli. Jelly beans also, and pizza. I was really surprised I didn't see pizza on a lot of the lists of the presidents. The average president did not like all these foods. I mean, just think about the gluttony of these rich foods that you're eating every, I don't want to say every day, but you're eating very often. I mean, if you have a cook cooking for you, like anything that you want, I mean, within a short time, you're going to be like, boop, you're not going to want it. Anyhow, Donald Trump.
Cheeseburgers.
Well, you are all just like, right. McDonald's, Egg McMuffins, never coffee, never tea, and never, what's the other never? Alcohol. And that was another thing. I did not see a lot of alcohol. Now, I'm from Brookhaven. There's a lot of alcohol with politicians, but I didn't see a lot of that in this. I guess if you're running the world, you gotta have gotta keep focused. Okay, Biden, drink of choice. Nope. I was really kind of surprised with this one. No. No, actually, he's very careful about what he eats. It's amazing what I learned about these presidents. It's like crazy.
That useful?
No. No. Gatorade. Orange Gatorade. It's nasty stuff, but he will actually have staff members bring it to him, like when he's having a cocktail party, in a glass, and bring him Gatorade. So he does orange Gatorade. Yeah. Anyhow, so that's kind of noble state dinners. How long do you think it takes to create a meal if the Queen of England is coming and you're making a state dinner? How long do you think it takes to put it together? A couple of days? Took me 3 days to do your snack packs. Seriously. I had to go shopping. I had to figure out what to do. I had to do the research. Then I had all these bags lined up on my kitchen table. Then I had to cook. I had to put it back in the refrigerator, which thank God it was cold last night. I put it in outside in the car, and then I brought it back. There was a lot of bags. How long? Months. At least 6 months. At least 6 months. You're the president. You have an idea. You want to entertain, blah, 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 from. Maybe they should invite Rush to the home. Anyway. To break bread, to talk. It's a very dangerous situation. I have a 20-year-old son. I am dreading it. 6 months for a dinner. These are the three groups. The First Lady, which we talked about, the State Department, and then the White House Secretary. State Department. Can you imagine the security to throw a meal? There was one, here, Ulysses C. Grant, S. Grant. He had the king for a 20-course meal. So the king had to bring his royal food testers to test the food. Like, we're gonna poison them at a White House dinner. It used to be 40 people. It now sits 120. And now obviously, since this was written, the meals are much more grander than that. The Roosevelts had the King of England, the sixth, George VI, okay? And that's when he ate his first hot dog. They had dinners for the signing of the Panama Canal. They had, let's see, in 1985, does anybody remember, you probably all remember this. It was when John Travolta danced with Princess Diana at one of these state dinners. Clinton was the first president to host Nelson Mandela, the first Black president of South Africa, and so on. These meals are really important. These meals, there's a tremendous amount of thought, planning, protocol, etiquette. If the Queen of England, I remember reading this whole thing prior to this discussion, what is the one thing she will not eat? And it kind of stuck with me after that, because now I don't do it. Because I'm worthy. Garlic. If you're an official, you don't want to eat garlic and then be talking to people. Like, she just won't eat anything with garlic in it. She won't eat seafood in case, because of seafood, you can get sick very easily, and so on. There's all of these things that have kind of morphed over the years that we revolve around food. Any questions? I have a whole book of presidents here. You can just find out, yes?
Didn't Clinton like McDonald's?
I don't know if Clinton liked McDonald's. I just know Trump, it was listed. But if you want, I will look that up before you leave and see if it's in there. So just imagine the president in his car with bulletproof glass going through drive-through. And then realizing he has no money on him. You charge him? I was actually going to go and see if I could get you coupons for McDonald's, but then I just kind of ran out of steam. So I want to tell you what you have in your snack bag. In your snack bag, turn the page. Okay. You have little cherry pies. Anybody know why? President's Day. George Washington chopped down a cherry tree. Guess what? He did not do that. That was total propaganda in a book. And the story was that his father gave him a hatchet and he kind of scarred up the tree, and his father was upset with him. But George Washington told him the truth. And that was the moral of the story, is tell the truth and your father won't get upset with you. Okay, so it was a made up story about the cherry tree. Total myth, like Thanksgiving. And that whole turkey and sweet potatoes and whatever. There was no turkey at the Thanksgiving, the first Thanksgiving. So I'm sorry if I just popped your bubble on that one. I'm sorry? They did. There's only a little bit of written record about that meal in particular. It was a couple days. They had waterfowl, no turkey. They had venison. There was 3 deer that I think they mentioned. In some seafood, but no turkey. Turkey was actually a marketing thing that came much later. And it was because the average family was growing and a small bird couldn't feed a whole family, and turkeys were large enough. But that's where that whole turkey thing came to be.
I read once someplace that the slaves would get lobster. That was considered like junky food. And they would just stick lobster all the time.
You know what? Anything that I have read, it's only, and if that story is true, I'd have to do research on it. It would be only if they were right by the water. So if you were inland, even 5 miles, you weren't getting lobster. But any seafood and whatever. Also, the movement of slaves, you just couldn't say, oh, it's Saturday, I'm gonna go fishing. It wasn't, Yeah, I would have to kind of really think about that, because if you're also feeding 70 people and you're a throwaway, think about, lobsters are not kind of about this, you have to kind of go. Yeah, if anything, I would say maybe crabs or possible, clams, but not, I wouldn't say lobsters, only just because logistically, in the late 1700s, I mean, you have to go diving for them. They're not, just hanging out. Okay, so mac and cheese, we already talked about with Thomas Jefferson. He had a passion for food. When you get home, it's like a half a cup, just milk, take it out of the little plastic bag, put it in the microwave for a split second just to get it warm. These are only tastes of food. Hoppin' John, anybody know what that is? It is yummy. I had it for breakfast and lunch today. 1840. Okay, the earliest presidents, they all mentioned this in their foods. It's basically beans and bacon and some kind of smoked pork. Pretty much every single president had that within their listing of things. There was some combination of that, many different recipes. I'm sorry? It was called Hoppin' John. And it was from 1840. Early presidents mentioned in all their writings, it was beans, rice, and smoked ham. It was also cow peas. It calls for black-eyed peas. Black-eyed peas are not black-eyed peas. They're cow peas, and they're really beans. So they're not peas. Cornbread, backbone of America. Historic foods, cornbread shows up everywhere. It also shows up as corn, ash cakes, hoe cakes, journey cakes. If you were going out into the fields, you could put it in your pocket, a journey cake. The hoe cakes is that they can warm it up on it, like you have a gardening hoe, it's like a piece of metal with a little hole in it, right? For gardening, you could use that to heat things up and cook on it. Just kind of scrape the dirt off. Peanuts, we already talked about the 25% protein in it, jelly beans, Reagan and Obama, the Civil War. Bush also, William, liked pretzels. He was big into pretzels. How old do you think pretzels are in the timeline of food? Pretzels. How far way back? At least. If you look at old Dutch paintings, like from the 1500s, 1400s, those oil paintings, you'll see pretzels in there. Sometimes they look like kind of like more of a figure eight, but they're hanging on a tree, and they're usually like in a window or some aspect of the picture. But look in the back side of the picture, you'll see pretzels hanging in there. Those food pictures of the Dutch, lots of pretzels in there. So they brought them here to the Americas. Okay, on your way home, stop at McDonald's and you can pretend to be Trump. Never turned it. Okay, I'll drive really fast. Coffee, tea, alcohol, we talked about, and he loved Egg McMuffins. Gatorade, we talked about with Biden, and that is pretty much what's in your bag. So as you go through your bag, just remember things about history, but it also is that don't just put food in your mouth. Take a moment. We have Google it. Like if you're eating something, I don't know, pick something up, tuna fish with mayonnaise. Where did that idea come from? Like, why do we dye eggs? And I know there's that bread with the eggs in it, that braided eggs. There's some symbolism with that. And once you start untangling those little mysteries, food becomes exciting. And it becomes like a mystery, and you start unraveling it. If you look into something, I don't care what it is, long enough and with passion, it will reveal its secrets of where it came from, what it was used for, how it evolved, because food evolves. So I did one class on something called meat pasties. It was puff pastry with a little bit of meat inside of it. And I was like, I know this. It was Hot Pockets. I could buy them in the frozen food aisle. 1600s went right through to that time period, to modern times. So does anybody have any questions? Yes.
Did they all have the fancy dinnerware?
No. That didn't come until a little bit later in time period, and it changes from time to time. And I think typically that would be the wife of the president. I don't think the president I think she might change the pattern, and sometimes the pattern of the dishes may change to the diplomats that are coming. And there was one instance, I think around the 1800s, that it was so overboard that the flower arrangements were done in silver boats, ships. So when you go to any kind of fancy thing, think about just the generic wedding that you go to and how much the bride spends on, just little flower poofy things in the middle. Could you imagine the White House and what their flower bill is? Just on flowers alone, those big giant, presentations, what color they are, how big they are, that you can see the person on the other side. All of that is a thought process that goes into these diplomatic meals. Napkins, who sits next to who, how close the chairs are, what shape the tables are. And that's not even talking about the food itself. Is the food edible in the sense that you don't have to wrestle with it? Is it, bite-sized pieces, what time of the day it's going to be held, what alcohol is going to be served or drinks with it, and so on. So the thought process that goes into these meals are insane. I just kept reading and reading about all the work that goes behind it and the amount of people, hundreds of people for one meal, hundreds, because I Googled that too. How many people does it take? And it was like hundreds of individuals doing all this. Then the servers, even the what do they call that? The uniforms, for lack of a better word that I'm looking for, the uniforms, I think they're called liveries, the clothing that the servants are wearing to serve to this day, that's all orchestrated when people walk in and so on. So it was a really interesting subject, and I'm kind of glad that I got to speak about it, because it was just incredible, the amount of thought process that goes into all these meals from early on to more recently. So, okay, anything that you want to look up, or what you want to look something up?
Well, we're gonna go back in history a little bit. In like 1805, Napoleon was like the first general that had reached a 1,000,000-man army. And it wasn't that he was a good strategist, it was just that if you were going to fight somebody, your army is bigger than their army, half the time you won. Well, even more than half.
How did he feed them?
Exactly right.
How did he
You
feed?
had no refrigeration, you had no train.
So he
everything
put
was walked back.
a request out. You know how he got food to his troops?
So, no,
No.
his army was just to beat the enemy.
So Napoleon in the food timeline of things is responsible for the tin can, but it was lead. So there was a little bit of a problem there. But that was the beginning of the evolution of packaging food. He needed food to feed his troops because he had a lot.
Right.
He needed to be able to preserve it. So going back on the tin can thing, we know a tin can now. So we have tin cans that we take can openers and we open up. We have tin cans, Spam, Devil's Food, and we're very, because they had a key that you could open up the can and you didn't need. Right. So remember the Devil Food cans that you can kind of like go around the edge and Spam? All right. So before that, what did they do? Colonial. We're going back now another 100 years. No. They did a couple different things. They took care of themselves. They did. So they did something called potted meat. So potted meat was, if you could picture, I'm just trying to think size-wise, like a jelly jar. All right, like a jelly jar. Whatever meat was left over, they would mash it in a mortar and pestle. They would pack it in, get all the air out of it, and then they would put some kind of a fat on top of it, and then put a like a stomach or intestines, and stretch it around the top, and it would kind of, as it dried, it would seal it, and you could actually transport meat like that. So you had potted meat, or you could make something called pocket soup. Anybody know what pocket soup is? So pocket soup is rendered. You take your meat. You ever make pot roast and you kind of take it out, and then you've got that kind of fat that sits on top of the gravy, and you go, I don't want that because I don't want to die of a heart attack. So you take the fat off, and then, well, then you make your gravy, right? And then, well, you have that stupid pitcher that you put in, it's supposed to remove the fat, you know, from the whatever. It never works and trips on everything. So you take that juice that you've cooked in, and you render it down to the point where it becomes kind of like, oh, I forgot to put it away. And it becomes like a jelly, you know, because you had your dinner, you had your dessert, and you go, I'm not cleaning that up. And then the next day you got this kind of jelly stuff going on in your pan. So that jelly stuff, if you were to take it out, let the air get to it a little bit longer and let the air just dry it out, it would almost be like bouillon. And you could put it in your pocket. And you could take it with you and then reconstitute it with hot water. And then if you're in the field or whatever, and you were able to get some herbs or some turnips or whatever you gathered along the way, you could make yourself a pocket soup. You'd have that base of that bouillon. You have to realize when I go to bed, my head is exploding. I was doing a cook one day, and if anybody go on YouTube, look up Mrs. Q. She does Revolutionary War in New York City, blah, 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 whatever. But she came out and I did a whole thing for her, and she's like, do you know how to make pocket soup? I'm like, no. So after cooking all day, I get in my car and I put it on like YouTube, like on the dashboard, like this as I'm driving home in the rain on a back road. I'm like, but it's bouillon. That's it. So those troops, they knew all of these not technologies, these things. They knew how to make pocket soup. They probably knew how to make jerky, any of the meats that or whatever. And that's how troops are fed. But it only goes so long before you have to supplement it with something else, because you're not growing, you're not preparing, you're not doing. Also, another myth is that only men went to war. Is like a lot of women went, and they were preparing and schlepping and doing all this work for feeding the troops. They don't tell that part of the story. In history, I learned this with Judaism. They don't count the women. They just don't count the women. You don't hear about the women. You don't hear about like the work. You hear about men, but you don't hear about the women. And women have always been in the back. Of course we have. See.
Supposed to be medical corps originally, during the Revolutionary War. A lot of the women were, they would pick up the hurt soldiers right up to that.
Yeah, they would, but they were doing laundry. They were doing the cooking. They were doing that, whatever, the gathering. They were doing, but if you open a book, you're not going to see any of that. Very rarely will you ever see any kind of mention of women in there. I mean, and just think about it. It's like crazy. Those heavy pots and building fires and whatever, and not knowing if your husband's coming back because they're fighting over there somewhere and so on. Horrible stuff. War is horrible. Anyway, any other questions? All right. Well, happy President's Day. That's all I can say.
Thank you, Diane. I'm gonna get myself into the picture a little bit and thank Diane again, and then I am going to stop the recording,
Okay.
and then we can
You can
chat some
continue.
more. So thank you all for being here. I'm stopping the recording.
Also, I have 20 bags, possibly 22 bags